Of our properties of real numbers unit, and today we're going to talk about something called the distributive property. Now, what you need to remember about the distributive property, if I can flip here. All right, let's see. There we go. All right, so, and then we keep going. Come back. All right, so the distributive property really is just an extension of multiplying two numbers. All right, so when we look at distributive property, we're really still multiplying two numbers. It's just that that internal number has now been split apart. Man, everything's slow today. Let's go. Click open here. There we go. Here we go. All right. So now, I think all of you would agree that 3 times 10 is in fact 30. All right. But now, what happens sometimes is that this internal number that we're multiplying the 3. Oh, and then where did it happen there? Ay. Weird today. All right. There we go. Let's do this. All right, so this 10 that we're multiplying 3 by, we can write 10 in a lot of different ways. So the first way, I know you've already seen it, but we'll let it be a little bit of a surprise, is that we could still write 10, but we could write it as 7 plus 3. So this is still 10, so 3 times 10 still has to be 30. And what you can see is that this 3 gets multiplied times all the pieces of 10. So if I do 3 times 7, that is 21. And 3 times 3 is 9, and notice that still gets us to 30. And we know it has to be 30 because right here this is a basic fact. We know that has to be true. But even if I write 10 a different way, so 5 plus 5 is still 10, so I still have 3 times 10 is 30. Well, notice 3 times 5 is 15. 3 times this 5 is also a positive 15, and so notice we get 30 equals 30. And then just in case you didn't believe it, one more example. Notice I could break 10 into 3 components. So 2 plus 7 plus 1 is 10. All right, so 3 times 10 still has to be 30, right? But if I do 3 times 2, that's 6. 3 times 7 is 21. And then 3 times 1 is 3. And then what you see here, slide that out of the way, is that we still get 30 equals 30. Just like that. So the distributive property just tells us that no matter how we break up this internal number, right here inside this parenthesis, whatever is on the outside being multiplied gets distributed to each piece, whether it's 2 pieces, 3 pieces, or I could break 10 up into multiple pieces, 5, 6, 7, 8 pieces, whatever we wanted to do. All right, so the idea is we have to distribute this outside piece to all the pieces on the inside. So now let's look at these examples. Now what's going to happen is that we're now going to get a variable involved. So notice we have 3 times something again. Well, we have this variable x and then we have subtraction 9. All right, it doesn't change the idea that this is some number, it's just broken into 2 pieces. And so we have to distribute this 3 to both of those pieces. Now 3 times 1x is just 3x, and we're going to leave it just like that. Now I distribute the 3 to the next number. Now remember, when we do this, we have to include the sign in front, so this is a negative 9. So 3 times negative 9, all right, would be a negative 27. Now this is our final answer. All right, so if we know what x is, we could plug that in and simplify. But right now, this is an x term, a variable term, and this is a number term. Those are not like terms, and we'll talk a little bit more about like terms in the next lesson. So we can't combine them, and we're going to leave it as so. All right, let's look at our next example. This time, I'm going to distribute negative 6 to some number inside of our parentheses. Now, once again, this number is broken into 2 components. We have a variable component, so we have an unknown, but we still distribute. So I do negative 6 times negative 2x. Now, a negative times a negative is a positive. 6 times 2x would give us 12x's. And then I do negative 6 times negative 3. A negative times a negative is a positive. 6 times 3 is 18. All right, and you can see that that's just our process. All right, moving on to the third example. I would take negative 5 and distribute to the first component, and distribute negative 5 to our second component. Negative 5 times 2 is negative 10x, and then a negative 5 times 4 is negative 20. Now, notice here we have the first number, and then the second number that we're multiplying against has been broken into 2 components. However, from time to time, what you may see is that we have the second number and the first number is broken into 2 components or multiple components. We're still distributing, but now it's kind of in reverse. We have to take this number and multiply, and then multiply here. So we're still distributing, but we're distributing the second number as opposed to the first number. And it follows the same rule. So I have 4 times negative 8, which is negative 32, and then 4 times 3x, which would be a positive 12x. And then once again, if we get over here, you can see that our second number is negative 3. Our first number has been broken into two components, 7x minus 2. So I distribute that negative 3 to the first component, negative 3 to the next component. A negative times a positive is a negative, and so we have negative 21x, and then negative times negative is a positive here, and we have 3 times 2, which is 6. All right, so that does it for my example. So now I'm going to give you a set of problems to work on your own. So go ahead and pause the video, attempt these 5 problems, and we'll see how you do. All right, my friends, I'm going to flip to the next slide and show you the answer. So this is what you should have come up with for your 5 problems. All right, most of the mistakes that are made here really are sign mistakes. So the biggest issue is once you distribute, okay, I would always check the sign, the SIGN of your number first. So for example, a negative times a positive is a negative times negative is a positive. So always do that first and then come back and do your math fact. 5 times 4x is 20x, 5 times 5 is 35. And then double check those signs as you distribute. Now I'm just going to talk about the third example here. Now remember, we see this negative here, and I'm just going to write this real quick. Remember that this really is negative 1 times all of this stuff. So if we see just a negative, it's really negative 1, so that's negative 1 times negative 5. So that's positive 5x, and then negative 1 times negative 11 is a positive 11. All right, so that wraps up this quick lesson on distributive property. Go ahead and move on to the next worksheet, and then check in with me if you have any questions.